Funding for Building New York is provided by First American Title Insurance Company of New York.
Welcome to Building New York. My name is Michael Stoller. New York City has a problem. There aren't enough affordable housing. People work in New York City and they can't find affordable housing. Who's building this affordable housing? This 45-year-old former psychologist, sociologist, Peter Fine, has been on the forefront since 1995 of building affordable housing. Today, I'm fortunate to have Peter Fine, the co-founder and principal of Atlantic Development.
Thank you, Michael.
Peter, 45 years ago, you were born in Booth Memorial Hospital, which has been changed to New York Hospital, Queens, and you grew up in the Electchester projects. What were the Electchester projects?
Electchester was a low-income Mitchell-Lama development that was sponsored by Local 3, which is the electrical union in New York City. And I think it was built in the mid-50s, primarily for electricians, but when I grew up there, it was about half electricians and half other people, mainly working people.
And your dad, he was in World War II, he was in Japan and other parts, and he came back, he was in the textile business, and when you moved into the projects, he was the taxi cab driver.
Yeah, he had already become a yellow cab driver.
And your dad, I don't know how he accumulated it, he bought this cooperative, this limited equity co-op, for $1,000.
Approximately.
And you were saying to me prior to the show, the rent was, the maintenance was what, $89?
I remember when I was a kid, the rent never changed in our apartment. We had a two-bedroom apartment. It was my parents, I have two brothers, and it was $89. When I was a kid, I remembered up until the age of 15, 16, and then they installed air conditioning in the development, and they did an assessment, and from what I understand, then they started to actually give annual increases, and the yelling was unbelievable because people were so used to paying one price, they got spoiled.
And in high school, you lived in Flushing, but you went to high school in Jamaica. You had no idea of being in the real estate. You were telling me during the sometimes in the afternoons, what were you doing when you were going to school?
Mainly going to Aqueduct.
You were going to Aqueduct, so you were with your brothers.
My older brothers.
Your older
right.
brother, checking out the frequency, and you also during high school you were a messenger.
Oh, no, if you're referring to
no, the
work.
Aqueduct was part of it. But work, you were...
Right, it wasn't very high-paying work because I thought I could make more money at the track. No, I had like a lot of kids who grow up in New York. I had a variety of jobs, but during high school, I remember I used to go down the hill from Jamaica High School to Hillside Avenue, and I had an early schedule, so I would be in the city by about 1 o'clock, 1:30. I'd take the F train, and I was a messenger until about 5:30, 6 o'clock. Because as you know, messengers, it's not a 9 to 5 day. It would work with the flow of work. So some days I would work to 6, 7 o'clock. And I remember in those days, like today, everybody has work boots. In those days, we didn't have work boots. And I used to wear sneakers. And in the wintertime, my toes, would get so cold and would, get red and swollen. And my mother, being a Jewish mother, when I would come home, would literally start crying that I'm suffering, this and that. So as much as I was a rough kid and on my own, I was also very protected.
And is that a reason why you work for Tom McCann in the Queens Center?
That was another job. Right, I used to sell shoes, I think, for 2 years in Queens Center, and Tom McCann, which I think now is out of business, if I'm not mistaken.
But now, you had no interest in real estate. Now, we were talking prior to the show that here's a guy who went to Jamaica High, graduates Jamaica High, and ends up at the State University of New York in Cortland.
Right.
And tell my audience why you went there, and the story about your father and the individual Harold.
Right. Well, and my father, I'd like to say my father was the most intelligent man I've ever met, but he was also an uneducated man in that, he had to start to work, I think, probably when he was about 11, 12 years old.
And he owned the taxi with another partner, so they were working 24 hours a day. I mean,
the car was working 24 hours a day.
Each one had 12-hour shifts.
Right. They would work day-night shifts. But we didn't have like a well-developed concept of education and what the steps necessarily would be for me or my brothers. And although education was very, very important, and my father and my mother really stressed that dramatically in the house, and to a certain extent, I think, with my father, to compensate for his lack of education, he stressed it even more. And when I was a kid, we had a family friend whose son had become an optometrist, not an optician, optometrist.
You were saying everybody was from Brownsville.
Right. My family, actually my older brothers were born in East New York, and my entire family, my extended family, were all from East New York. When I was growing up as a kid, about half of my family still lived in East New York. We used to spend our Sundays going back there. Electchester was a way out of East New York for my parents. And, but all those people maintained their ties. And in the summer times, I remember we used to go to a bungalow colony in the Catskills, and all the families were originally from East New York, even though in the 60s, some of us were in Queens, some were in Brooklyn, heaven forbid, some were in the Bronx or Long Island. But most of us were in Brooklyn and Queens. And so an old family friend from East New York had become an optometrist and had opened 1 or 2 stores and was making money, and he was doing well, as they say. And my father was quite taken with that.
So you were going to become an optometrist?
Right. So basically, we were a very traditional family. He chose a profession for me, that I should become an optometrist. And this particular person had gone to Cortland State. So my father said, okay, you go to Cortland State. So I applied. I was accepted. And I remember my father specifically said, you go. He says, you don't have to go for 4 years. He says, you can knock it off in 2 or 3 years. You just need to do the coursework in science and math to apply to optometry school. You'll get in, you'll do it, you'll have a profession. It's a 2-year degree. Once you get into optometry, 5 years from now, you'll have something, and you'll be making money.
You have your store, and everything was fine.
Everything was fine. Little did he know that glasses eventually, I think, are going to become obsolete, but in those days, it was a choice. So I went to school, and I declared as a biology major.
Far from real estate.
Far from real estate.
And then 2.5...
Even farther from sociology.
Right. And how did you change from biology to sociology?
When I was in school, I had absolutely no aptitude for sciences or math. So it became quite clear to me after 1 semester that I couldn't do this. My brain just didn't function that way, and I was really suited for humanities and social sciences. I had taken some courses, and I was turned on by it. And I didn't declare a major because I didn't want my father to know that I wasn't still a biology major. So I just started to take coursework in literature and social sciences. I wasn't officially a sociology major.
And then you go to Arizona State University
Correct.
for 6 months
Correct.
to learn about life in the West.
As I say, I needed to get west of the Meadowlands. Yes.
You needed west of the Meadowlands. And then you come back to NYU. What happens at NYU?
Okay. NYU really opened up a lot of things for me. I did my last 2 years of college there. I got a BA. Really just being in the village was just a tremendously expanding experience for me, because although I grew up in New York City, you know, I really grew up in a very, very kind of closed way, you know, with family and friends. But the village was an international place. I mean, there were students from Europe, Asia. I interacted with a lot of kids, a lot of professors from different types of backgrounds. And it was very, very good for me. And after I graduated, I took a little time off, and they offered me a fellowship to continue and pursue for a PhD in sociology.
In sociology.
Which I did.
And now you have all the credits for a PhD in sociology?
Right, I did all the coursework, I was on fellowship. I'm a tremendous disappointment, I would imagine, in NYU because I didn't finish the PhD. And, you know, a fellowship is quite an investment from the university in you. But after I got done with my coursework, I started working, and quite honestly, I never looked back.
Right, and during college, you were working, as you said, you probably knew every bar, and as a bartender, a busboy, and everything. And then you had one great story you told me about, one place that you worked, which was possibly a place from a Tony Soprano movie, right?
Well, what I really knew and specialized in was Italian restaurants, because most people think I'm Italian. So it was easy for me to get a job as a busboy or a waiter, and then I would fool the customers that I was Italian. Yeah, but one place, without getting into details, was owned by someone who probably was making their money illicitly, and most of the customers were his associates.
So now you're close to you could be a PhD in sociology.
Correct.
And you get a job at the Educational Alliance in an area that you had no idea, because you know nothing about real estate. What's at the Educational Alliance? What are you doing there?
I didn't want to stay in academia. I was a little tired of that world, and I wanted a very practical application of all the schooling I had had. And there was no more practical application than helping people. I mean, literally one by one. So I went to work at the Alliance, and I became the program director of a homeless program. And it was a street program to go out and find homeless people who needed help. And that parlayed itself into opening up a drop-in center, excuse me, on 23rd Street in Manhattan. And there were some adjunct programs, shelter programs attached to that. And I really immersed myself very much in the problem of homelessness, I'd say from like 86 to 88, which was a good time to immerse yourself, because it was just a burgeoning problem in New York City, and people were trying to figure out why the homeless population was growing so rapidly. And also there started to be a lot of money, governmental money and foundation money. And I always like to say, I think I worked harder probably in those 2 years than I have in my entire life. And I work hard.
1988, what happens?
In 88, I moved on to another nonprofit called the Met Council on Jewish Poverty. Initially, I was the special assistant for the executive director, a guy named David Cohn. And as I always say with David, you know, once you work for somebody, you always work for somebody, because he can call me today and start telling me what to do, and I listen. Even though it's been, 18 years or whatever it's been. And I was basically his special assistant, and we got into housing. He was interested in housing. I was interested in housing as a result of working with street people and having the experience of trying to place people in housing.
So what type of housing was Met Council doing at that time?
We basically developed supported housing.
What is supportive housing?
Supported housing is housing with social services. So we developed, let's say, SROs for seniors, mental health housing. When I was there, we had gotten into a HUD, senior citizen project. We were started to dialogue with the state. At that time, they unveiled something called the New York Agreement in those days, which was housing for the mentally ill to place people out of psychiatric hospitals into community facilities. And again, I immersed myself in something and developed an expertise in it.
1991.
I had gone back to the Ed Alliance, I think, in '90. They offered me to become the associate executive director of the agency, which I took the position.
Which this year you're going to be the honoree on the 20th anniversary.
This year I am the honoree at the annual dinner in conjunction with me having gone to work there in '86, which I think was a very, very nice thing for them to offer me. I think that dinner is going to be in May. And I had gone back, but I was there for about 6 months, and I realized that the administrative aspects of the social service world was really not for me. And the everyday supervising of people and programs and compliance, the government, for the money.
So how does Peter Fine now leave the nonprofit world and get involved with Building of New York?
Okay. I had the experience of doing a few governmental facilities when I was at Met Council. I was overseeing some affordable housing at the Alliance. And I saw that there was a tremendous need, mainly for, again, supported housing. And I started a business helping other nonprofits build supported housing. And I left the Alliance. And from '91 to '95, I probably did about, I think, 12 facilities. I had no money. And again, it was a matter of really working very, very hard, because I was also writing a lot of social service plans, because the housing was really just a physical place for the treatment that was taking place, for people who were HIV positive or mentally ill or homeless. And it was very rewarding work. And I accumulated some money in fees in doing that. And again, with me, it's always been a matter of, once I was interested in something, I guess I have an obsessive character structure of some type, because I would just immerse myself in it, and before long, doing a tremendous amount of work.
It's 1995. You and your partner, Mark Alltime, who you
Right.
met from Met Council.
Correct.
At 30, you're 34 at this time. Mark is 32.
Right.
Decide to create something called Atlantic Development. How do you come up with the name Atlantic Development Group?
Okay, Mark and I, at the end of '95, I think we each put like $5,000 in a checking account. And we wanted a name for the company that was big, because we wanted people to think we were big. And we came up, it was either Pacific, and I think Harry Macklow had some kind of a firm.
He had Pacific Management.
Management at that time. I don't know if he still does or not. And so we decided Atlantic Development Group, and it stuck.
And the first project at Atlantic Development Group, and I remember you because I met you when you started, you had that little office over there, was you bought a hotel in Ossining, New York. I mean, you like going upstate like Cortland. What did you do over there? What was that?
Okay, we initially, the core concept of Atlantic was we wanted to take our expertise, which was in supported housing, and translate it to the middle class and upper middle classes. And we wanted to do that with assisted living for seniors, which I saw The Sopranos the other day, and they keep talking about assisted living on The Sopranos. It's not a very positive thing, but we thought it was a positive thing. So we bought a hotel in Ossining, New York, which was vacant in bankruptcy. And we had no capacity to do this.
You had no money either.
We had no money. I remember we borrowed the down payment, and I always say that that's pressure. You know, that's pressure. To borrow the down payment, sign a contract, and have to close in 90 days, and have absolutely no concept of how we were going to do it.
At this time, you had done other aspects of real estate, but you had never built an assisted living facility to speak of.
No, we were somewhat familiar with those capital markets. And actually, you know, we had access to capital markets to do the project. The problem, we had no track record. So we had to reach out to operating companies. And luckily, we were successful in partnering up with an assisted living operating company that wanted to get into Westchester County and also the New York metropolitan area. And we basically gave away most everything in the deal, but you know, we got the deal done and the building was built.
And over the next 2 or 3 years, you built, what, 4 assisted living?
We built facilities in Stratford and 2 facilities in Brooklyn.
Yeah, one was in Mill Basin.
One was in Mill Basin, one was in Sheepshead Bay, which we did with Sunrise Assisted Living.
And then you
we
did
had
one in Manhattan.
In Manhattan, we had a small portion of, and then we started just building apartment houses.
Right, that's the interesting thing, because today you are the biggest developer of affordable housing.
I think so.
Most of it in the Bronx. I'd say, you know, you were joking that there were no friends or relatives who would move to the Bronx, and you have more housing developments in the Bronx than most people I know.
Right. We've done.
But so what's affordable housing? I mean, that's everybody always asks me. How does somebody find affordable housing, and why have you been building affordable housing?
Well, first of all, it's something that we're good at, and it's also something that a lot of other people don't want to do. So I like that. You know, I always subscribe to the big fish in the small pond theory, and I think we've probably built about 40 to 45 apartment houses in the last 10 years, which are mainly affordable housing. I mean, today we're also in the luxury market in Manhattan, and along the way we did one mid-market piece in the North Bronx by Van Cortlandt Park. But I think most of the real estate community knows us as, you know, very active affordable housing developers, and we are. Just that we're spreading out a little bit today to different markets.
Right, so you've done a lot of affordable housing in the Bronx, and you've done a lot of what we would call inclusionary housing, which is also affordable housing in the city.
Right.
A lot of properties that people see in Manhattan are properties that you've been responsible for.
Correct.
On 3rd Avenue, another one right now on 61st Street and 1st Avenue. So you're at 4,000 apartments. Now you're in the market rate housing. What are you doing in the market rate housing?
About a year and a half ago, we did a deal with, at that time, Hudson Waterfront Associates, they were the owners of the master plan from 59 to 72nd west of West End Avenue. And they had affordability requirements as a part of their master plan. And we did a very, very complicated transaction where we took one of the parcels. I think there were 18, if I'm not mistaken. And we said we would do 3 tiers of housing with the piece. And there are restrictions that run with our land. So it's about 330 units. So it's about 150 affordable units, about 50 mid-income units, and it's about 110 market units.
Well,
and
for my audience, the affordable component can be 40% of the area median income, and then 60% of area median income, which means they can earn up to 30,000, up to 35,000, and that's in one of the towers, one of the buildings. And then you have the other building, which is a mixed use, which is a 23%, I believe, affordable, and a 27% at 165% of area median income, and then the balance is market rate.
It's a very complicated building. It's 61st and West End. What we did is it's one building, but we created a separate entrance and a condominium interest on one portion of the building, and we made an affordable senior citizen development, 120 units. And the actually Met Council on Jewish Poverty, the agency that I worked for 17 years ago, is going to manage it for independent seniors. And then the other portion is essentially a residential tower. It's 25 floors. It's 211 units. Again, essentially it's an 80-20 rental, but with the exception that there's about 50 units that are at mid-market, mid-market being about a $2,100 two-bedroom. Instead of the market today is from $4,000 to $5,000 for a two-bedroom apartment in Manhattan. So that's it, and God willing, we'll be done sometime in the summer and get out of Dodge and rent the place up.
Now, the biggest problem that we have is to get more affordable housing. How can we do that?
We can get, the government is the linchpin. They can create more affordable housing by rezoning, manufacturing land, both systematically and on a spot basis as the occasion arises. And this mayor, has done wonders, to tell you the truth, for affordable housing. It's a tremendous commitment of using city resources, and we just have to do more of that.
So, Peter, over for 45 years of age, for a sociologist, you've really you've done a lot. You've been creative. You always are one step ahead on the next avenue of business.
Thank you.
You're planning to build in Cooper Square another property over there, and so on. If someone would ask you, because we don't have that much time, what is the best place today for a new development, where would you say? Is it the Bronx?
For we like to think of ourselves today as building for all New Yorkers. We're at the affordable end, we're in the mid-market end, and we're at the luxury end. And so for us, there's no one market, and there's no one right place to build, and no one right product type. And so the right place, honestly, is really where the opportunity affords itself.
Okay. You and Mark and the people at Atlantic, from the 2 people who I remember to the 80 people
Well,
today,
we were alone, yeah.
We were alone, have really built New York, and I'm really happy that you've been my guest today on Building New York.
Thanks, Mike.
Funding for Building New York was provided by First American Title Insurance Company of New York.